To our webinar, Cartegraph 8 to Cartegraph OMS, the conversion process. My name is Damian Waid, and I'm the Marketing and Events Coordinator at Cartegraph. And here with me is Omar Chaudry, Cartegraph Field Services Manager, and Josh Glider, Implementation Support Specialist, presenters of today's webinar. And as Cartegraph's Field Services Manager, Omar oversees our project implementation teams with 10 years of experience in implementing and designing software. He's had the privilege of working through a variety of business challenges across the United States and Canada. And as Cartegraph's implementation support specialist, Josh is an internal resource supporting our field services staff by way of data conversions, integrations, and OMS environment configurations. Before we get started, we are accepting your questions. To submit a question at any time during the course of the webinar, select the Q&A feature located at the top or right-hand side of your screen, and questions will be answered at the conclusion of the webinar. And we'll answer as many questions as time allows. And without further ado, I'll turn things over to Omar and Josh.
All right, perfect. Thanks, Damian. My name is Omar Chaudry. I'm excited to provide this webinar here today. As a Field Services Manager, I actually oversee a lot of the scoping process and all the scope of works related to our project implementations. And I know that there's a lot of questions that clients have regarding our Cartegraph 8 to Cartegraph OMS transition and that conversion process. So I'm excited for all that are in attendance here. I see some recognizable names in the audience here as well. So hopefully this will be productive and informational here for you. So just to jump right into it and get started at a high level here, we're going to run through our schedule and our presentation. So we'll start first by talking about the timeline. Oftentimes, again, when clients are looking to transition to OMS, one of the first questions is, what can we expect after we start after we sign the agreement and move forward? So what's that timeline going to look like? What are the milestones there? There's also questions around resources and resource commitment. So what can we expect from Cartegraph's side in terms of resource commitment and guidance? And then what will we need to do internally to have ourselves staffed to be able to support the project and the implementation? So we'll talk a little bit about the resources there. From there, we'll get into the details around the actual data migration, and that's where Josh comes in. He's kind of the brains behind the operations there, does a lot of our data conversion work, and has seen all kinds of things that can help him express sort of some of the pros and cons of converting that data and just what to expect in that process. From that, we'll also talk a little bit about ArcGIS integration and our potential to being able to pull in some data from that technology. And we'll talk a little bit about then preparation. What are some items that you can prepare for already before you even start to move forward with OMS? So we'll talk a little about those in a little more detail. The discovery phase also really gives us the ability to look at what are those core business requirements that must stay in place for us in terms of moving forward with a new technology platform. So we can make sure that we've identified all the items that are needed there before we jump into actually getting the environment built out and configured for you. So we'll do that discovery. From there, we configure the environment. We get things staged and ready for our next training event, really, which is where the rubber meets the road. We actually will load your test data as well during that staging process. I'm going to kind of gloss over that a little bit because Josh is going to talk to us a little bit more detail on that piece. But we'll load your test data into a training environment so that we can actually train your organization on OMS with your data in there. From that training stage, then we jump into a testing phase. So we want to maintain momentum, all the things that we've been able to impart and that you've been able to learn during that training process, we want you to be able to put into practice right away. And so the testing phase generally will last, 2 to 4 weeks, depending on your preference and the size of the implementation. And in that testing phase, you and your users have the ability to get into the system, to play with it, to poke around, to go through some workflows that you're expecting to use when the system goes live, and identify any kind of wrinkles or hurdles that we need to overcome. Where do we need to tweak the system to make sure that we can dial it in and get it as close to 100% as it needs to be before we go live. Now, we also understand that it's an evolutionary process. Anytime you implement software like this, you're not necessarily going to be able to get everything right up front, and that's not a problem. We're here to guide and support that process. So as you go through testing, as items are identified, we can make some adjustments and tweaks. Once we've done that, once you're comfortable as well with where the system is at, that's the point that we schedule a go-live event. And that go-live event is basically us turning the switch, saying that you are now using a production environment, and OMS is now that system managing your operations and your assets. One really important piece to mention in this timeline that I haven't referenced up to this point is that we oftentimes will phase projects in as well. So when you have a really large project, a lot of different departments that are either using Cartegraph today or excited about coming on board with OMS, those are items where we'll want to talk with you and actually come up with a phased plan, because trying to get everything done at one time, although it's doable, does end up introducing some risks to the project and requires a much bigger lift on your end as well. So those are conversation points that we would want to have. Typically, and the reason I mention that now is because as we go live with one department, we may start other conversations with other departments to get them up and running here as well. But once we've gone live in a timeline for an individual phase, usually a couple of weeks after that point, we'll do a post-production follow-up. And that's just a touch point for us to connect, to do a little bit of a retrospective, to see what worked well, what didn't work well, and then also to identify if there's any kind of refresher trainings, any kind of tweaks or adjustments that might be needed, as well as to talk about next phases or kind of future growth with the system. So that post-production follow-up gives us the ability to kind of circle back and make sure that we've addressed any looming questions out there, anything that needs to be addressed for you to successfully be able to use the system going forward. So in a nutshell, that's kind of our timeline. Again, Josh will talk about that in a little more detail. Oftentimes, people are interested in how long it takes to get a system like this up and running. So if you're talking about an individual domain, which might be maybe transportation, so signs, supports, pavement, marking, one kind of maybe department or division within your organization, we can get an application, Cartegraph OMS, up and running with a conversion within about 10 to 12 weeks if you're doing it remotely. Now that requires some significant attention on your part as well, and all the dominoes kind of need to fall in the right order there. If we're doing an on-site implementation, we do need to allocate a little more time for travel and just to kind of keep costs manageable from an expenses standpoint. So those tend to run about 20 or so weeks. And again, that's with an ideal expectation of being able to get some input or data turned around, some decisions made in a really timely manner here. So with that, I'm going to jump ahead and talk about the resources, because that's a lot of oftentimes what drives a timeline for a project is who's available for the project, how much time do they need to spend on that project. So when I talk about this kind of 10 to 12 week or 20 week time frame, depending on whether you're doing remote or on-site, I want to first share with you then who's going to be involved from Cartegraph's side. Now, on Cartegraph's end, you have a number of different resources obviously available to you. Your account executive is someone who's available. I'm available as an escalation point personally as well. But typically speaking, your project team on Cartegraph's side is going to be made up of a few individuals. So you're going to have a dedicated project manager. That's someone who is in charge of basically making sure that your project roadmap is established, the items that need to occur are occurring in a timely manner. If there's any risks that may be brought up or may be identified as part of the project, that they can work with you to help mitigate those risks on our side. If there's anything internal from a scheduling conflict or otherwise, those are items that your project manager is going to be able to deal with. And a project manager is really integral to making sure that your project is successful, because they can help paint the picture, give you an idea of, here's what needs to happen and the order in which it needs to happen. Let you know what we're looking for from you as well in terms of kind of decisions that may need to be made or data that may need to be collected or returned to us so that we can get the environment staged for you. The project manager is really going to be kind of your point of contact for all things on that project. Beyond that, you'll have your implementation specialist. Your implementation specialist is your Cartegraph expert. They are not only experts in software implementation, but they have a lot of experience in working with a lot of different organizations out there. So they can provide you with some guidance, some best practices, not only on how the system should be utilized, but what we've learned from other agencies out there. I was just sharing with someone internally here the other day that if you look at our current implementation staff and resources, of the 5 implementation specialists that we have, 4 of them have been with Cartegraph for 10 years or more at this point. The 5th implementation specialist has actually worked in government IT for 17 years before he started at Cartegraph just about a year ago. So we've got an incredible breadth of experience there. That kind of experience and exposure to different environments and how different municipalities implement our application and use our software, I think is really beneficial to be able to be brought to you as well as part of that transition. One other item that you may not see on the slide here is that if you are doing a remote implementation, your project manager and your implementation specialist are typically the same individual. It's a one-stop shop. Those smaller projects don't have as many kind of moving parts to manage, and so we have our technical experts that can actually implement the application for you, but they will also manage that project for you there as well. Finally, behind the scenes, we have a number of technical staff, whether those be our development resources or someone like Josh, our implementation support specialist. They are technical staff that can help support the project. Josh, in fact, is the person that works on a lot of data conversions, so he'll be able to speak to those components here as part of our webinar today, but that's kind of the makeup of our team. I also want to call attention to the fact at the bottom here, we've got some percentages listed. And these are kind of tough to nail down because there's a different amount of contribution required at various stages of the project. For example, when we're doing an initial setup of the project, our technical staff may be involved at that point. They may also be involved during a data conversion process or an integration that needs to be built, but otherwise it may be more of our implementation specialist involved on our side. And I've got another slide here that will show what we're looking for from a project team on your end. Similar concept and idea there. As we're going through the discovery phase of the project, we may be looking for more involvement from some of our subject matter experts. As we're going through a setup, we may be looking for more involvement from your technical staff at that point, but they don't necessarily need to be involved throughout the project. So these are Cartegraph's resources. Jumping ahead for your resources and when it's time for you to get involved and to kind of help carry the project internally there, we're looking for a very similar subset. So we're looking for project managers, someone who's going to be your point of contact there, who can work with your internal teams, identify any kind of non-software project-related risks or items that need to be managed, resources that may need to be brought together on your side to have conversations and decisions made. Those are things that the project manager really is responsible for on your end and what we'd be leaning on them for. Beyond that, we'll look to have stakeholders involved, and this may be multiple individuals, but these are decision makers. These are people who are influenced or impacted by the implementation of the software, by changes in workflow. So again, as I mentioned a little earlier, Cartegraph OMS new application is a great opportunity to kind of take a step back and say, you know, all right, so we've been using our application a certain way, our workflows have been set a certain way for a while. We now maybe have some opportunity to gain some efficiencies there by introducing new technology. You may want to have some stakeholders involved in those conversations, people who have the ability to agree and make some decisions so that we can kind of move forward with some of those changes if they become necessary. The other element here is your subject matter expert. So subject matter experts are people that have a lot of domain experience. You know, we've all got those individuals who know how long a hydrant's been in place or how long a pavement segment has been in place before it's been paved because, you know, they just got the information upstairs. That's great. We need those experts to be part of our project because that we may be asking questions around workflow, around setup of the application, around business requirements. compliance requirements, items that can't fall off the radar, and our subject matter experts are often the folks who are really engaged in those details and can give us feedback and let us know that, hey, you can't adjust this workflow in this way because X, Y, and Z may be impacted. Or if you do make that adjustment, you got to keep these things in mind because, they're part of this overall process. So subject matter experts are extremely important to be involved as part of that project. And there may be multiples of those, again, depending on the departments and divisions that might be engaged. Finally, technical staff, whether they be your DBAs, your network administrators, Cartegraph OMS actually has a hosted solution that's available, so that actually takes quite a bit of burden off of our clients from a technical standpoint because we can host the environment, we can host the database itself, and so the main impact that may occur at that point for technical staff is support in getting some iPads set up and making sure that the workstations that you're using to connect to the internet meet the system requirements. That kind of impact is a minimal set that would be required for a technical staff member in the event that you went hosted with Cartegraph OMS. So that speaks to the resources themselves. I do want to just jump into a quick document here that I do have, which is one of the tools I referenced a little bit earlier. So it's a readiness assessment document. And just to kind of give you an idea, hopefully you can all still see this here on my screen. Any one of you who are engaged in a conversation and moving from Cartegraph 8 to OMS has likely either seen this report already or will be seeing it as part of your processes when you do your upgrade or transition to OMS. This is a great automated tool. All you have to do, if you haven't gone through this process already, is you jump out to Cartegraph Campus on our website. Your sales rep will send you a link to this file. You download the file, you run it like you would any other report in Cartegraph Navigator or Cartegraph 8 today, and export that report out as a PDF. So it's really just a few button clicks. There's nothing too involved here, but this report has been automated to pull information out of your environment to give us a little bit of a precursor to what we can expect. So as an example, in this instance, this was run against a particular database, and right away we can tell that this client is using NBI standards for bridge. They're using pavement detail distresses. They're not using NASCO, for example, in this instance. If they were using fleet, we'd be able to identify that. If there's a fuel integration, so on and so forth. The next page kind of lets us know all the different assets that are implemented currently, the record counts, how many inspections have been done. And all of this is really just a tool for us to use to have a conversation with you to identify which portions of Cartegraph did you really implement and start to utilize versus other components that may not have been as relevant. In this case, for example, I'd be able to tell that, yeah, you might have storm pumps as a module, but there's no records really that exist within that. However, storm culverts looks like that was utilized in this particular environment. There's a few other headings here, again, that we don't necessarily need to get into kind of all of the weeds on. Certainly those conversations will happen with your rep as you're having those discussions on the transition to OMS. But the other kind of key piece I wanted to call your attention to here is the standard data conversion language. So we have a couple of different types of conversions, a standard conversion as well as a custom data conversion. Josh will speak to both of those options here. But if you're curious about what that standard conversion includes, all the detailed language is right in that report as well. So as soon as you run that report, you can reference that, and your sales rep certainly would work with you on getting some details identified there. Again, that's just one tool that we use. There's a few others as well that we would talk about as we go through our process when we do that conversion. So with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Josh. He can get into the nuts and bolts of the data conversion and all the things to kind of consider there.
Awesome. Thanks, Omar. So Omar just gave us a great kind of overview of our timeline, what to expect, resources that are going to be required. I'm going to kind of get more into the technical details about how we do things and why, experience that we've had in doing conversions and how that all benefits you. So since the inception of OMS, we've done 82 Navigator conversions. And to do all those, we actually developed an internal tool that helps us automate the conversion process. This allows us to minimize the duration of database conversions and standardize the way that we actually convert the data. So to do that, we performed an exercise in translating the structure and functionality from Cartegraph 8 to how it exists in OMS, and we identified the pieces that fit and the pieces that don't fit. And because everything doesn't translate perfectly, we kind of take a consultative approach to guiding our clients through this conversion process. So at its core, OMS was designed around data integrity. So that means good data in is good data out, and that's relevant to reporting, accountability, and just a general overall return on your investment. So we kind of take that same approach in the way that we handle our database conversions. So with our guidance, we recommend you take this implementation as an opportunity to identify and remedy any data integrity issues, any bad data entry practices, or just bad workflows. Moving forward, this will increase the usability of and your success overall with the platform. This is also a process that you can start prior to beginning your implementation with us. So that's one question that we get a lot. What can I do to start? A big thing that you can do is kind of identify areas in which you may have messy data. So a good example of that is with client street libraries. We often see that. So often there are duplicate street names, which we'll kind of see on a slide here due to varying suffixes. So a lot of times you'll see somebody puts it in as street, somebody abbreviates it with an ST. So when you actually go to pull the data out of the system, either via filtering to find data that you need or reporting on that data, it makes it very difficult when they're kind of scattered like that. So cleaning those up, making them match, making each reference to that street match is called a process called normalization. So we recommend taking that approach to not only a library like this, but kind of overall any data you may have in Navigator or GIS, and go ahead and normalize that. And then moving forward, you can use OMS's configurable user-level security to keep it clean. So moving forward, keeping that data clean makes it easy to pull that data back out, make sure that when you go to filter on it, you're getting all of it. So in terms of just how intimidating the process can be, we definitely understand that the idea of moving everybody that uses Cartegraph over to a new system, like I said, is certainly intimidating. So Omar touched on this a little bit, but because of that, for large user bases, we recommend implementing a phased approach or separating the phases out by department. Pretty much makes one huge project into 5 smaller projects. That makes it seem less intimidating, and you can kind of mark off small wins as you go by. So Colorado Springs, one of our larger clients, has had a project in flight for most of 2015 that we're currently on the tail end of. And they began by moving their highway department, then forestry with traffic engineering, then streets, and then finally their parks department. So we found using this approach has made the transition much more manageable, and it continuously builds their in-house expertise and adoption rates. So don't be intimidated if you have a large user base. We definitely have an approach for that. So Omar touched on a little bit the idea of a standard versus a custom conversion. So our standard conversion tends to focus on the things that are current. We do offer a custom conversion, which is in regards to converting all of your historical data. So the idea of not maintaining comprehensive historical data in OMS and having to leverage a legacy system for access to that information can definitely be intimidating as well. There are valid concerns on both sides of that argument, and there are a number of things to consider when making that decision on which type of conversion to move forward with. So one big thing is keep in mind that your custom libraries or your custom fields are not excluded in a standard conversion. Those attributes that you track will definitely be converted. And in scoping a custom conversion, our staff focuses more on the level of that historical work and inspection data that needs to be converted, or that we need to talk about or identify those pieces before we kind of move forward. So on this note, know that you'll have access to your legacy Navigator system, meaning this historical data will be available to you still. a good question to consider is how often do I actually report on this data? And if the answer is more than a few months' time, I should definitely evaluate if conversion of that data is truly necessary. Also consider that Cartegraph 8 and OMS are two distinctly different systems. And in the time since the development of Cartegraph 8, there have been a number of changes in both functionality and industry standards. So for an example, a standard conversion does not include the migration of detailed distress data within pavement inspections. And this is because ASTM specifications around collecting that data have since been updated from ASTM 6433-2 to ASTM 6433-11. So in that update, certain distresses have been separated, resulting in a different set of deduct points and a varying effect on your subsequent condition index. Also, values for the beginning and the end of a pavement sample are now collected during a PCI inspection. So even though there's value in that historical data, certainly there may not be equal value in a custom conversion to bring it forward. So to actually convert that data, you'll end up being forced to mix standards as well as manipulating that data into a state in which it wasn't originally collected. And really the result of all of these things, just to get that data to move forward, ends up changing your OCI, so you'll get some discrepancies between the two systems. And again, you just kind of mix standards and that sort of thing. So that's an example of one of the reasons why we handle things the way in which we do. When we do a custom conversion, we implement them, I would say, roughly 20% of the time. Most often, they're conversions of work order or request history. So to dig into that a little bit, the way work orders and requests are tracked in OMS is significantly different from what it was in Cartegraph 8. In Cartegraph 8, a work order could be work completed against a collection of assets in which your costs would all roll up to that top-level work order. In OMS, a task is work completed against only one asset. So a task is the equivalent of a work order. So because of this, because there's only that one-to-one relationship between a task and the asset in which that work was completed against, there's actually no true way to convert old Cartegraph 8 work orders and their costs, meaning that you'd really be left only with a historical reference to that old work order. And if that was the case, it'd be just as easy to achieve that by referencing your navigator data, because we wouldn't have a true way to split out those costs, because that work and the actual resources used for it were tracked differently between the two systems. So again, on that note, requests also have changed in that a request in OMS is a collection of logs against a single issue. In Navigator or Cartegraph 8, there was one issue per request, but in OMS, we allow multiple calls for a certain issue. So again, just an example of, in order to convert that data, it would just mean that we have to manipulate it a little bit, and that results in a loss of data integrity just because the functionality of the two systems is different in many ways. So there's also been instances in which we've completed a custom conversion, namely conversion of material logs. And for a client that has actually later come back and requested us to remove that data from their system, kind of inhibited their usability of it and the ability to get to the data that they need to get to. So our procedures and the way we handle things are designed to identify these red flags during either the scoping phase, which Omar was talking about, by using that system profile report, or actually during the testing phase of your implementation, when you may identify these sorts of things and be able to change them before you go live with your production conversion. So on the flip side of that, we will also be able to identify if your legacy data would be a good candidate for complete conversion of your historical data. If your Cartegraph 8 system was not highly customized and you used the default functionality or used the system the way it was designed to be used, also if your asset data is complete in terms of key dates, events or impacts, inspection and condition history, a complete conversion may be a viable option for you. So you could expect to have conversations around these topics before and also during a project. So we talk about the scoping phase, and we've talked about how to kind of prepare yourself for these decisions and things that you'll have to consider. But then once the project is actually kicked off, we'll get into this timeline here of where we actually start getting involved in doing that actual work. So it begins with the test conversion, and we actually complete the test conversion before you begin your training. And this is a huge benefit because it allows you to see your data in context as you're transitioning to the new system. So we've learned that if we begin training in an environment that does not have your data, it's not as easy for users to pick it up and really see how that data is going to act and how they're going to benefit from that conversion. So we actually train you in an environment with your data in it. So the implementation specialist will work with you on training, they'll work with you on configuring your system and developing workflows or migrating old workflows, and you'll use all of this knowledge to begin testing. So testing the system, getting around, playing in with your data, adding new data, and really it's really important to test the way your data was converted, get in there and see how it exists in there, because that's what the testing phase is for. So the testing phase allows you to prepare for your go-live date in a variety of ways. It allows you to see how your data was converted and use that knowledge to potentially clean up your Cartegraph 8 data prior to the production conversion. It allows you to analyze whether or not data needs to be converted and whether or not it fits into OMS functionality and workflows. And it also allows you to configure the system as to limit design and duplication of work during the production conversion. It's, again, extremely important to conduct thorough testing during the designated testing phase so any potential issues can be ironed out prior to actually being live in the system. So I really can't stress that enough, as it's very important to get in and test your data and make sure it comes over the way in which you expect it to. So I talked a little bit about our internal conversion tool and how we use that to migrate Navigator data, Cartegraph 8 data. One of the utilities that's generated from that is called the field map, and it's a spreadsheet that maps how your structure and data was converted from Cartegraph 8 to OMS, but it's also useful in accompanying consultative discussions. It allows you to see which fields support default OMS functionality or which fields might support a custom type of workflow. It allows you to see which assets might not be complete. And what I mean by that is you may have asset records, but you may not have any attribution. So if I have some sign records in there, but I don't know the MUTCD code for any of them or the location or their height, they may not be complete. The field map will allow you to kind of identify those, again, work with your implementation specialist and kind of develop a plan to move forward with that. It will allow you to see libraries that may require normalization or cleanup, and it will allow you to identify assets with attachments so you can prepare to move those actual files either to our hosted site or into your on-premise OMS project home. So the field map, it's definitely a useful tool, but actually visualizing and testing your data in your test environment is a much better training tool, and it should be relied on more so than the field map. The field map is more supplemental to that process. So after the testing phase, and during the testing phase, you'll find things that you want to change or that you want to tweak prior to the production conversion. So in conversations with your implementation specialist, they'll compile these notes and communicate them back to the internal team, whether it's me or one of my colleagues that are doing that conversion. And this will set the stage for a seamless production database conversion to where when it's delivered, none of those changes have to be made, and you're live and you're using the system. So when we go to do that actual production conversion, you'll send us a final version of your Cartegraph 8 database. Your data and any configurations that were done during the testing phase will be transferred to your production database. And after that process, with our support during that, you'll be live in Cartegraph OMS.
Perfect. All right. So I know, Josh, one thing that often comes up as a question from our clients is, do they have to convert their data, or are there other ways that they can maybe get their data brought forward? And I think there's a lot of interesting possibilities around that, and some tools. Maybe you want to speak to those a little bit?
Yeah, definitely. So, yeah, like Omar said, moving to OMS does not mean that you have to convert your data. It doesn't mean that all of your data has to come from Cartegraph 8, so it can be supplemented from a variety of sources. One of those sources is our system templates. We designed workbooks that were set up for easy collection of data such as labor, equipment, materials, rates, standard system libraries such as activities and issues. It's a user-friendly spreadsheet that allows, or spreadsheets that allow you to fill out your data in a way that everybody would know how, and kind of collect that and import that into the system. Really what that allows you to do is keep specific pieces of your Cartegraph 8 data and then kind of compile additional data to supplement that. So we often see clients convert maybe asset data, but start fresh with resource data, such as labor rates, equipment rates, material quantities, and this ensures that right out of the gate, you'll be able to track accurate costs on the work that you complete. So we set those up for use during project implementation. We found that they've been very, very helpful. Another source of data is from GIS. So whether it's from a web map or an actual feature service, we can certainly consume that data. So historically, GIS has been used as an avenue for asset inventory, meaning this is often a prime source for accurate and comprehensive asset, either location or attribution. So a GIS integration allows you to use this data as a starting point with Cartegraph by bringing in your assets, their location, and any sort of attribution, and then moving forward to layer on our predictive or operational functionality to expand your possibilities with the system. Another thing that we're excited about is our partnership with Esri and the other possibilities that it brings to the table. So one thing is that Esri web maps allow you to consume data in Cartegraph without that data having to actually exist in Cartegraph. And this allows you to make decisions, again, based on data that might not actually have to exist in Cartegraph. So I think Omar will talk a little bit more about our Esri partnership and the capabilities that come with that.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that I run into a lot on the front end of these projects, not doing the actual data conversion work myself, but supporting some conversations where we're scoping a project and identifying what data should be brought forward, is running into instances where clients may have utilized the flexibility of Cartegraph 8 to build certain Versa asset types. So whether that's parcels or account information, locational information. A lot of times these Versa asset types were the route that people would go down because if you wanted to see something on a map, it had to be basically either a work order or a request or an asset within Cartegraph 8. Well, Cartegraph OMS is completely map-centric. Is absolutely everything about it. There's a map on practically every screen. Location centricity is really important in terms of operations management. So there's a lot of different ways that you can actually get data on the map. And to Josh's point about our latest endeavor here with Esri, we've tightened our integration with them. We're actually able to now use ArcGIS Online identities and web maps as part of our implementations. And that has kind of changed the dynamic some. So web maps are a new technology that Esri has available to for us to use as well now that allows us to pull data into OMS that doesn't necessarily reside within the Cartegraph database. So just as a very quick example, I went out to ArcGIS Online and I just built a quick map, a quick web map out there. And now using, I'm just switching over here to Cartegraph OMS to kind of give you a quick visual with this. You know, we can pull in all kinds of different maps. You can configure those for your environments and for your individual roles. One map that I created is a parcel map. So it's not unusual when we're working with clients that are looking at their water network and infrastructure for them to want to have some parcel data associated with a water lateral. What you can now do is pull in information that doesn't exist within Cartegraph. So you may already have a parcel map or layer available within GIS. And when I click on a particular layer here, I can actually see the data. None of this data here resides within Cartegraph itself, but is coming from a GIS map within your organization. There's other avenues here as well. So in fact, using ArcGIS Online, you can pull data in that might not even be at your organization. It may be some premium content that Esri publishes. It may be a DOT or a county map that's published out for public use, or that you have the URL for that you can connect to. And you can then pull that data into your environment for some additional ability to make decisions. So things like crime maps. You know, if you're managing your light infrastructure and you want to get an idea of maybe higher instances of crime rates, a lot of times organizations will look at that data to prioritize some of the work that they're doing, some of the maintenance activities that they need to perform against their light assets out there. There's, you know, graffiti. A lot of times we had clients that were tracking graffiti within Cartegraph to identify movements of, you know, possibly gang movement that could be then you could work with your police department to put together a mitigating plan around. So the possibilities are kind of endless there. Any domain that you look at, there's a lot of different content that's available publicly that can be pulled in now into OMS. But I mention it here today not only because first, I'm excited about just all the possibilities of going from Cartegraph 8 to Cartegraph OMS and the functionality gains that you would get, but then things like this also factor conversations around data conversion, because where you may have needed certain data in a certain format in the Cartegraph 8 world because of how that software functioned and how you needed to arrive at a solution, doesn't necessarily mean that when you move to Cartegraph OMS that the same requirements or items may be in place there. So there's a lot of different ways for us to solve the same kind of problems, and this is just one quick sort of indicator of that. So with that, I'll kind of jump back to our present here. I know Josh also kind of spoke a little bit about preparation on the front end. That was the other item that I did just want to talk about real briefly. You know, so not only do you have some opportunity today to normalize any of the data sets that you may want to bring forward into OMS, but the other thing that would be important to do is to start to establish that project team early on. The project team, again, would be those resources that we talked about a little earlier, your project managers, your stakeholders, your subject matter experts, who are going to be the people that are going to be involved in that Cartegraph project and that transition, and then to start looking at the data as Josh mentioned, but then also at workflows. What are the workflows that you have today that may be up for some additional discussion or maybe up for review? And by contrast, what are those workflows or requirements that we really can't do without because of external sort of business requirements that you may have. So those are going to be a few other items related to just preparation that could help kind of get the ball rolling for you and get you prepped for that move to OMS. So with that, I think that brings us to the end of our webinar. I'll pause here to see if Damian has received any questions, or if we've got any questions that you may want to ask now. I think would be a great time for that. All right, let me see here. I think we've got one question. With limited users, limited data sets and features, can the migration from 8 to OMS be primarily accomplished in-house? So I'm going to assume here that when we say in-house, that what that question is asking is, do you need Cartegraph to actually provide the conversion, or is that something that you can do on your own? So technically speaking, absolutely, the conversion or the migration can be done in-house. I would defer back to the comment that Josh made about some of the standard templates and tools that we have that are pretty user-friendly. They allow you to get data entered in and imported into OMS as an environment in a fairly straightforward manner. And those templates and workbooks are all available to everyone out there on our Cartegraph campus site. We could certainly walk through those with you and give you an idea of what kind of lift that would be. So from a technical standpoint, I think, yes, that can definitely be done. There will be other cases where you want to bring in things like your latest inspection or, some other potentially, child or grandchild level data that could require some multiple steps in the process where it may be more efficient for us to do that for you. Josh, I'll maybe turn that over to you. I don't know if you have anything you want to maybe add to that as you go through those exercises pretty regularly there.
Yeah, definitely, at least from a technical standpoint, kind of what you touched on at the end is, it can be easy with our standard templates or import-export knowledge to bring in maybe your basic asset data or resources or things like that. But to really seed the system in terms of its functionality and usability in certain pieces, you'll want that work history, you'll want that inspection, you'll kind of want our hand guiding you through the important pieces. So I'd say that would be a big benefit of having us doing the conversion is kind of the more complex pieces that really set you up for success with the system. So.
Okay, perfect. I'm seeing one here. Josh, this one might be maybe a little more relevant to you here. So we're on a version of Cartegraph Pavement View and Pavement View Plus older than the current 8 system. Could this data still be converted to OMS?
Okay, yeah, definitely. I can definitely answer that. So I guess the first thing that I would say is there is really no equivalent to Pavement View Plus, at least an equal equivalent of Pavement View Plus in OMS. We do have Scenario Builder, but that was kind of a predictive tool that was rebuilt from the ground up. It does not, Pavement View Plus does not translate directly into that. So we do not convert any Pavement View Plus data. We would kind of walk you through rebuilding some of those scenarios in OMS's Scenario Builder. The answer to the rest of it is yes. So we will convert Pavement View data, even if it's on a prior version than the current 8 system. Our internal tool does require that it be on the most recent version, but that's something that we can handle internally of upgrading your data if we do have a conversion project for you. I did mention one thing with the detailed distress data in Pavement View. So if you are using the detailed distresses, we do bring over that condition category. So your condition index from those PCI inspections will come over, but we do not convert the detailed distress piece. So other than the Pavement View Plus part of that, the answer is definitely a yes.
Perfect. All right. Let me take a look. I think there's another question here. Is there a cost involved with the initial meetings to review the existing Navigator 8 data, or does the cost kick in once the data conversion estimate is determined? So great question. There is not a cost involved in the initial conversations in review of the Cartegraph 8 data. Typically, that scoping conversation is discovery for us, as well as for us to kind of make some recommendations to you in terms of putting together a service package that will work well for you in that OMS transition. And so that scoping exercises does not come at a cost. I will say there are certain instances, though, where we've got a large organization or a large transition that's being planned, and in certain cases, our clients have requested that we come on site for a few days and really go through a detailed kind of a needs assessment. When we do tip into that type of a lift or effort, then there typically is a cost associated with that kind of consultation. But any of the items that we've talked about today as part of this webinar would just simply be included as part of our discovery process. So next question here, and let me see. A couple of these are scrolling by, so let me make sure I can keep up. Okay, so there's one here about do we have a date when Navigator will finally be sunset? So at this point, there's no established date that's been defined. We are looking at all of our clients that are using Cartegraph 8 and moving forward, transitioning to OMS. So Cartegraph 8, as you may have noticed, a maintenance mode announcement did go out for that application. And maintenance mode is not sunset. What that simply means is that there are not going to be new features and enhancements added to the application. Sunset is going to be one of these events where you'll get plenty of notice, and you'll note at that point that what sunset means that the system won't be supported anymore. But there's no date that's been determined at this point for that. I know it's probably several years out, if that. But Cartegraph 8 is currently in maintenance mode. Okay, it looks like there's another question here. So no work orders, no inspections. So what about Versa projects? Cemeteries, housing, asset management, are custom projects able to be done in-house? Josh, maybe is that something that you want to address?
Yeah, definitely. So Versa projects, Versa assets, those would certainly be converted in either a standard or a custom conversion. So any asset that you've built that you're utilizing that you want to bring forward would certainly not be excluded in any way. What we identify as a custom conversion is by the amount of history that needs to come over in terms of asset events or inspections. So our standard conversion actually does convert open work, it'll convert your key date tasks, and it'll convert your current inspection. You get into custom conversion territory when you're talking about converting the entirety of that data or converting something such as actual work orders or requests, that sort of thing. But to really answer the specific question, any custom assets that were built that you want to move forward will certainly be converted in a standard conversion.
Perfect. And I'm just going to kind of piggyback on that a little bit here as well, because this is it's a pretty common question. And I think there's maybe a theme around some of the questions that are being asked where there is concern around not having access to the data that's been collected or entered into the system. So a couple of things to kind of note there. First, I want to make sure that that it's clear that you will still have access to your Cartegraph 8 environment even when you move forward to OMS. So if certain data is not converted, you'll still have ability to reference that data for reporting purposes or archival purposes. But when we talk about, and I'm reminded of this because of kind of the custom project nature of that last question. In certain cases, there may be better ways to do things within OMS. So if there's the ability to have multiple tasks inside of a work order, that actually facilitates some project management capabilities within OMS that may be a better spot for some of that data to go as opposed to into sort of that asset area of the application. So that's oftentimes where we'll engage in a conversation during that scoping process to kind of express the pros and cons of pulling that data forward into OMS and some options so that you make a decision that will help, again, usability of the system and adoption of it so that things show up kind of in the spots where people expect them to, and it maintains a really kind of easy to use experience and environment. One other item, there's a question here just wanting to be clear on the work order and service request data conversion. These items are not part of the standard conversion, but can be a custom data conversion. That was a question, and yes. So custom conversion basically sends us down a different path. So a standard conversion is a conversion where we've got more of an automated process. We still have several manual steps within that, but we've got kind of a standard approach to being able to get those accomplished. Custom conversions can be done in a variety of different ways. We convert third-party data into our application all the time as well. So pretty much anything is on the table for a custom conversion. It just means that we will need to have a more detailed discussion with you to express the potential impacts and downfalls of some of that conversion, and then there is generally a larger effort and cost associated with a custom conversion. But certainly from a technical standpoint, that option is available to bring over historical work orders and service requests. Question is, to view old work orders in Navigator, does it require a separate license from OMS? It requires a Cartegraph 8 license, but there is no additional cost to you as an organization to have that license. So you would have the ability to access that data with using the Cartegraph 8 interface. Typically, our clients that go that route will end up installing Cartegraph 8 on a couple of workstations, typically their administrator or IT workstations, where they can easily run reports or retrieve data, once in a while when it's required. Beyond that, keep in mind that Cartegraph does have an open-ended back-end database of SQL or Oracle if you're using that kind of an environment. And so you'd always have access to your data regardless of the Cartegraph 8 application front-end interface or not. All right, looking here, I want to make sure I didn't miss any. Sorry, Damian, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, it looks like we're at that time. I just wanted to thank you guys for the presentation. We're also going to be hosting another webinar on Thursday, March 17th at 11 o'clock Central Time. The topic is managing your park with Cartegraph, and that webinar will be led by Cartegraph Solutions consultant Todd Henderson. Please RSVP on Cartegraph Campus. Thank you for taking the time to join today's webinar. And if you'd like to learn more about operations management and other municipal industry topics, be sure to visit the Learn section at cartegraph.com. And if your question wasn't answered, if you have other questions related to this webinar, just include it in reply to the follow-up email you'll be receiving from us shortly. And once received, a Cartegraph representative will get back to you with an answer. Thanks again, everyone, and have a great day.
Thanks.
Thanks.